If you think destiny is made of big events, this story will prove you wrong. It starts with a detail. A candle lit, two tables side by side, a conversation too honest for two strangers. And when the lights come back on, the question isn't, who is he? It's why does nothing feel safe anymore? The ancient Roman walls of Chester stood sentinel against the October sky, their sandstone faces weathered by centuries of English rain. Within those walls, cobblestone streets wound through the heart of the city, like veins carrying the lifeblood of history itself. The rows, with their distinctive medieval galleries, cast long shadows as evening approached, and the River Dee whispered secrets to the stone bridges that had witnessed generations of love and loss. James Mitchell stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office, his broad shoulders outlined against the fading light. At 39, he cut an imposing figure, tall, powerfully built, with a jaw that could have been carved from the same unforgiving stone as the city walls. His grey eyes, sharp and calculating, surveyed the Mitchell Agro-Industries compound below, where trucks loaded with products destined for half of England rumbled through gates like soldiers following orders. Everything in his life followed orders. Everything had its place, its purpose, its carefully controlled outcome. His hand unconsciously moved to loosen his tie, Italian silk perfectly knotted like everything else about him. The gesture was mechanical, practiced. Nothing about James Mitchell was spontaneous anymore. Spontaneity had cost him too much. "Mr. Mitchell, the Whitmore contract is ready for your signature." His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom, professional and distant. Everyone kept their distance from James Mitchell. "Leave it on my desk." His voice was deep, commanding, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to be obeyed. As she left, James caught his reflection in the darkening window. When had he become this man? This fortress of a human being who felt nothing, wanted nothing, trusted no one. He knew exactly when. 7 years ago. The day Catherine walked out, her final words still echoing in the chambers of his carefully guarded heart. "You took everything from me. My body, my dreams, my future. I can't even look at you anymore." The complicated birth, the emergency hysterectomy, the blame she'd heaped on his shoulders like burning coals, the divorce papers served with surgical precision. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. And his response? A vasectomy. Swift, permanent, final. If he couldn't give her children, he would make sure he could never give anyone children. It was the only way to ensure this particular agony would never repeat itself. The Mitchells had always been powerful in Chester. Industrialists, landowners, civic leaders. But power, James had learned, couldn't fill an empty house or warm a cold bed. He grabbed his coat. The Whitmore meeting was at the Cross Keys, one of Chester's oldest pubs, tucked away in the historic quarter. He preferred to close deals in intimate settings, where men spoke freely over whiskey, and felt the weight of tradition bearing down on their decisions. As he stepped into the autumn evening, the first drops of rain began to fall. The 3 streets away, in a narrow building that leaned slightly toward its neighbor, like an old man tired of standing, Emma Davis was losing a battle with gravity. "No, no, no, please." She lunged forward, but the stack of books tumbled from the high shelf anyway, cascading around her in a literary avalanche. One particularly heavy tome landed squarely on her foot. Brilliant, just brilliant. She hopped on one leg, books scattered around her like fallen soldiers, her light brown hair escaping from its hasty bun to frame a face that was equal parts determination and exhaustion. The book nook had been her grandmother's pride and joy, a combination bookshop and cafe that had served Chester for 40 years. Now, at 29, Emma was watching it die by inches. The espresso machine wheezed like an old man with pneumonia. The shelves needed refinishing. The roof leaked in 3 places and she'd run out of buckets. The creditor's letters sat in a drawer she couldn't bear to open anymore. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister, Claire. "Sunday dinner at ours. Marcus is bringing clients. Try to look presentable this time?" Emma's jaw tightened. Claire, 2 years younger, married to Marcus Thornton, investment banker, country club member, owner of a house with actual working appliances. At every family gathering, Claire found new ways to highlight Emma's failures: the struggling business, the absence of a husband, The stubborn refusal to be realistic and sell the property to developers. "This place is a monument to the past, Emma," her father had said last month. "Sometimes you have to let go." But letting go meant erasing Gran. It meant admitting defeat. It meant watching another independent bookshop become a chain coffee shop, or worse, luxury flats. Emma bent to gather the books, her fingers trembling slightly. She was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of pretending everything was fine, tired of smiling for customers while drowning in debt. The lights flickered. She glanced up. Through the window she could see the street lamps along the road doing the same stuttering dance. The rain was coming down harder now, and somewhere in the distance she heard a transformer blow with a sharp crack. Then everything went dark. Complete, absolute darkness. The kind that only happens in the old quarter, where buildings block out the sky and emergency lights are considered modern luxuries. Emma fumbled for her phone, but the battery icon blinked red before the screen died. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. She needed candles. The hardware shop 2 streets over would still be open. Mr. Peterson kept old-fashioned hours and old-fashioned stock. Grabbing her coat, Emma locked the shop door and stepped into the rain, not knowing that 3 streets away, a man who believed in control was about to lose it completely. The ancient stones of Chester held their breath, waiting for 2 wounded souls to collide in the darkness. The cross keys was a relic from another century. Low wooden beams, uneven floors, walls that had absorbed the confidences of merchants and farmers for 300 years. When the power failed, the publican simply lit candles with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd weathered many storms. James sat at a corner table, his meeting with Whitmore temporarily suspended. The older man had excused himself to make phone calls in the flickering candlelight, leaving James alone with his whiskey and his thoughts, never a comfortable combination. The door opened, admitting a gust of wind, rain, and a figure he couldn't quite make out in the darkness. "Sorry, we're still open, but—" the publican began. "Please." The voice was feminine, breathless, musical despite its urgency. "I just need to get out of the rain for a moment. Do you have any candles to spare? I'll pay whatever you ask." James found himself watching the shadow move closer to the bar. There was something about the voice, a thread of steel wrapped in velvet. Desperation trying to sound like dignity. "Take what you need, love," the publican said kindly. "Old Chester looks after her own." "Thank you. I'll bring payment tomorrow, I promise." "No need for that. But sit, dry off a bit. Storm's getting worse." James saw her hesitate, then move toward the only other occupied area, near his table. She chose a seat 2 tables away, careful to maintain distance. He could make out only the barest outline of her in the candlelight. Smaller frame, something gentle in the way she moved despite the obvious exhaustion. Thunder cracked overhead, making her jump slightly. "First time in an old building during a storm?" James heard himself ask. He never initiated conversations with strangers. Never. "No." Her voice came from the darkness, warmer now, tinged with humor. "Just not used to nature reminding me how small I am. Usually I'm too busy for existential crises." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Busy doing what? Fighting losing battles. The honesty in those words surprised him. "You? Winning wars that don't matter." The response escaped before he could censor it. A pause. Then soft laughter that did something strange to his chest. "Well? At least we're honest strangers. The best kind," he found himself saying. "No pretense in the dark." "No." Her voice was thoughtful now. "In the dark, we're all just voices. No judgments, no assumptions. Just truth." James picked up his glass, studying the amber liquid in the faint candlelight. "And what truth are you running from tonight?" He expected her to deflect, to laugh it off. Instead, that I'm about to lose everything my grandmother built. That everyone was right. I wasn't strong enough to save it. That love for something isn't enough when the world runs on money and I don't have any. The rawness of it hit him like a physical blow. He'd spent 7 years building walls, and this stranger was simply open, undefended, either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. "Money isn't everything," he said, and almost laughed at himself. James Mitchell, telling someone money didn't matter. Catherine would have been hysterical. "Says someone who has it," she countered, but there was no bitterness in her tone, just fact. Having it doesn't mean it fills anything meaningful. Why was he saying these things? To a stranger? In the dark? What would fill something meaningful? Her question was genuine, curious. James was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. I thought I did once. I was wrong. Past tense, she observed softly. Whatever you lost, I'm sorry. Don't be. I chose most of it. He drained his whiskey. What are you fighting to keep? A bookshop and a cafe combined. It was my grandmother's, the Book Nook in Watergate Street. Do you know it? James went very still. He'd walked past it 100 times, never gone in, never had reason to, but he knew the building, leaning, ancient, somehow defiant in its refusal to modernize. I know it, he said carefully. It's dying. I'm dying trying to save it, but I can't let go. It's all I have left of her. And maybe, she paused, vulnerable, maybe it's proof that I matter, that I can build something, keep something alive, that I'm not just the family disappointment. James felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the ice. You're not a disappointment. You don't know me. I know you're sitting in a pub during a blackout, drenched from rain, asking for candles you'll pay for tomorrow even though you probably can't afford them, because you won't accept charity. That's not a disappointment. That's someone with spine. Silence. Then so quietly he almost missed it. Thank you. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then flooded back with startling brightness, making them both blink. James turned toward her, and his breath caught. Light brown hair, slightly damp, framing a face that was delicate and strong at once. Eyes the color of honey-touched amber, wide with surprise. A mouth that was soft, unpainted, genuine. She wore a simple sweater, jeans, and rain-soaked boots, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd seen in 7 years. Emma stared at the man who'd been a voice in the darkness. Tall. God, he was tall. Shoulders that seemed to fill space. A face that was all hard angles and sharp edges, except for those grey eyes that were looking at her with something between shock and recognition. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive everything. And completely, utterly, out of her league. Oh, she breathed. Oh, he echoed. The air between them crackled with something neither could name. In the corner, Whitmore returned, calling James's name. But James couldn't move, couldn't look away from the woman who'd been honest in the darkness, and was even more devastating in the light. Emma stood abruptly, grabbing the candles. Thank you for the conversation. Wait. James rose, but she was already moving toward the door. She paused, looking back. Their eyes met again. Lightning, thunder, storm, all inside two people who'd been strangers 5 minutes ago. Then she was gone, into the rain. James stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs like something trying to escape. What the hell just happened? James Mitchell didn't sleep that night. He lay in his vast bedroom in the restored Georgian townhouse overlooking the River Dee, staring at the ceiling as rain drummed against the windows. His mind kept returning to honey-colored eyes and a voice that had stripped away pretense in the darkness. He told himself it was nothing. A moment. A conversation. Meaningless. By morning, he'd almost convinced himself. Then he walked past the Book Nook on his way to the office. The building looked worse in daylight. The sign faded, one window cracked and taped, the stonework crying out for attention. But through the smudged glass, he could see her, Emma. She was arranging books on a display table, her movements efficient despite obvious fatigue. She wore a cream-colored sweater today, sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and her hair was caught in a messy knot that somehow made her more beautiful. James found his feet carrying him toward the door before his mind could object. The bell chimed as he entered. The smell hit him first. Old books, coffee, and something indefinably comforting. The space was cramped but charming, mismatched furniture giving it personality rather than polish. Classical music played softly from a radio that had seen better decades. Emma looked up from her work. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by something that looked like panic, then careful neutrality. Hello. Her voice was professional, guarded. Nothing like the woman from the pub. Can I help you find something? He should leave. Should turn around and maintain the careful distance he'd built around himself. Instead, coffee, black. Of course. She moved behind the small counter, her movements precise. Anything else? Are you always this formal with customers who've seen you drenched in a thunderstorm? A flush crept up her neck. She poured coffee into a mismatched cup with hands that trembled slightly. I'm always professional with customers I don't know. We talked for 20 minutes. In the dark, to voices. She set the cup down, meeting his eyes with quiet dignity. Daylight changes things. You're clearly someone important. I'm someone trying to keep a dying bookshop alive. Let's not pretend we're equals having a casual chat. The words stung because they were meant to create distance. But James saw through them. He'd built enough walls himself to recognize construction materials. I never said I was important. You didn't have to. Your suit costs more than my monthly revenue. She rang up the coffee, her tone matter-of-fact rather than bitter. £2.50. He handed her a £5 note. Keep the change. I don't need charity. It's a tip. For good coffee. You haven't tasted it yet. James picked up the cup, took a deliberate sip, and felt his eyebrows rise involuntarily. It was exceptional. Rich, smooth, perfectly balanced. This is excellent. Emma's expression softened slightly. It's the only thing in this place that still works properly. Gran taught me. She said coffee was a language, and if you spoke it well, you could touch people's souls. She was right. He meant it. Is she gone? 3 years now. Emma turned away, busying herself with wiping down the already clean counter. Hence the slow decline into bankruptcy and eventual demolition. James studied her profile, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way her shoulders carried weight they shouldn't have to bear. What if it didn't have to decline? Then I'd need a miracle, a lottery win, and possibly a fairy godmother. I'm fresh out of all three. What if you had an investor? Emma's hands stilled. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowed. Why would you, whoever you are, care about investing in a failing bookshop? James, my name is James. He set down his cup. And I didn't say I was offering. I asked what if. Well, James. She crossed her arms, defensive. Hypothetically, I'd want to know what they'd want in return, because nothing's free, especially not from men in expensive suits who show up the day after meeting me in a blackout. Smart, cautious, self-protective. James respected that, even as it frustrated him. Maybe they'd want nothing. Maybe they'd just recognize something worth saving. Or maybe they'd want control, a share, decision-making power. And suddenly, it wouldn't be Gran's place anymore. It would be just another investment property with synergy and market repositioning. Her voice had edges now. I've had those offers. I turned them all down, because you'd rather fail on your own terms than succeed on someone else's. Yes. No hesitation. Absolutely yes. James felt something shift in his chest. Admiration, recognition. This woman was made of the same stubborn steel he was, but she'd somehow kept her softness intact. How? Then I respect that, he said quietly. Emma blinked, clearly expecting an argument. You do? I do. He finished his coffee, set the cup down gently. Same time tomorrow? For coffee. For coffee. His eyes held hers. Just coffee. No investment offers, no strings. Just excellent coffee in a place that deserves to survive. She studied him for a long moment, searching for ulterior motives, hidden agendas. James kept his expression neutral, though his heart was beating faster than it had any right to. Finally, Emma nodded. Okay, just coffee. As James left, he caught her watching him through the window. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away, a flush creeping up her cheeks. He walked toward his office with purpose in his stride and a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Behind him, Emma leaned against the counter, her hand pressed to her rapidly beating heart, asking herself what the hell she was doing, entertaining the attention of a man so clearly out of her league. Neither of them noticed the dark sedan parked across the street, or the camera lens pointed at the Book Nook's entrance. In a city like Chester, secrets were hard to keep, and James Mitchell's sudden interest in a failing bookshop would raise questions in circles where questions led to consequences. True to his word, James appeared the next afternoon at precisely 4 o'clock, and the day after that, and the day after that. By the end of the first week, Emma had stopped pretending she wasn't watching the door around that time. By the second week, she'd started making fresh coffee at 3:50. By the third, she caught herself checking her reflection in the antique mirror Gran had hung by the register, smoothing her hair, adjusting her collar. She was furious with herself for caring. James always ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar. He'd sit at the corner table near the history section, sometimes reading newspapers he'd bring, sometimes just watching her work with an intensity that made her skin feel electric. He never pushed, never asked personal questions, never mentioned investments or business again. He simply existed in her space, solid and steady as the Roman walls themselves, and somehow that was more dangerous than any aggressive pursuit could have been. "You're staring again." Mrs. Patterson, one of her regular customers, whispered conspiratorially as she checked out her romance novels. The elderly woman's eyes twinkled with mischief. "I'm not staring," Emma whispered back, not looking at where James sat reading the Financial Times. "Dear, I've been alive 78 years. I know staring when I see it, and he's been staring at you for 3 weeks straight." Mrs. Patterson leaned closer. "That's James Mitchell, Mitchell Agro Industries. Half of Chester's economy runs through his companies." Emma's stomach dropped. That can't be right." "Oh, it's right. I've seen him at city council meetings. Cold as January wind, that one. Never smiles, never compromises. They call him the Iron Man of Chester." Mrs. Patterson glanced at James, then back at Emma with meaningful weight. "Until now, apparently. He's been in here every day for weeks. That's not about the coffee, love." After Mrs. Patterson left, Emma couldn't help stealing another glance. James looked up at precisely that moment, catching her. Instead of looking away, he held her gaze. Something passed between them, wordless, charged, inevitable. Emma felt her cheeks warm. She busied herself reorganizing the counter for the 3rd time that hour. The bell chimed. Claire swept in like a force of nature, perfect hair, designer coat, and an expression that catalogued everything wrong with the shop in 3 seconds flat. "Emma, honestly, this place looks worse every time I visit." Claire's voice carried, designed to be overheard. "Daddy's right. You should sell while anyone's still interested." "Hello to you too, Claire." Emma kept her voice level, though her hands tightened on the counter. "I'm serious. Marcus has clients who'd pay decent money for this location. You could get a real job, meet actual people instead of hiding in this dusty museum." Claire's eyes landed on James. She did a double take, recognition and calculation flashing across her features. "Well, perhaps you have been meeting people." Emma's jaw clenched. "Claire." But her sister was already approaching James's table, smile bright and predatory. "James Mitchell. Claire Thornton, Marcus Thornton's wife. We met at the Banking Association gala." James stood with mechanical politeness. "Mrs. Thornton." His tone was cool, professional. Nothing like the warmth Emma had started hearing in his voice when he spoke to her. "What brings Chester's most eligible bachelor to this little place? Slumming?" Claire laughed, the sound sharp. "The coffee." James's grey eyes flicked to Emma, holding her gaze for a beat too long. "It's exceptional." "Oh, I'm sure it's not just the coffee." Claire followed his gaze, her smile tightening. "My sister does have certain charms, though I should warn you, she's quite married to this sinking ship." The air temperature in the shop seemed to drop 10 degrees. James set down his newspaper with deliberate care. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "I find loyalty admirable. As for the shop, any place that's survived this long clearly has value some people lack the vision to see." Claire's smile froze. "I only meant, I'm sure you did. Good day, Mrs. Thornton." James sat back down, effectively dismissing her. Emma watched her sister's face cycle through shock, indignation, and something that looked uncomfortably like jealousy before Claire turned on her heel and stalked out. The silence that followed was deafening. "You didn't have to do that," Emma said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do what?" James didn't look up from his paper. "Defend me." To her. "She's—" Emma struggled for words. "She's right, in a way. This place is dying." Now James looked up. "Is that what you believe, that she's right?" "I believe in facts, and the facts say I'm failing." James stood, moving toward the counter with purposeful strides. Emma's breath caught as he approached. He seemed larger somehow in the small space, his presence overwhelming. He stopped on the other side of the counter, close enough that she could see silver flecks in his grey eyes. "You know what I see? Someone who shows up every day to fight for something she loves. Someone who makes coffee like an art form. Someone who treats elderly customers with patience and young students with kindness. Someone who's doing the work of 3 people and still manages to smile." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "That's not failing. That's courage." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His hand moved as if to reach for hers, then stopped, hovering in the space between them. The air crackled with possibility. "I know you deserve better than being told you're not enough." "James!" Her voice came out breathless. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. Emma saw conflict flash across his face, want warring with fear, desire battling restraint. Then a customer opened the door, shattering the spell. James stepped back, breaking eye contact. "Same time tomorrow?" Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. As he left, she pressed her palms flat against the cool counter, trying to steady her racing pulse. Through the window, she watched him pause on the street, his hand running through his dark hair, in a gesture that looked almost frustrated. What was happening between them? And why did it feel like standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified and exhilarated at the same time? Inside his chest, James's heart pounded with something he'd sworn he'd never feel again. Want, need, the dangerous, destructive desire to let someone past his walls. He'd meant to keep his distance, to simply be present, nothing more. But standing close to her, seeing the pulse flutter at her throat, watching her eyes darken with awareness, he knew he was in serious trouble, the kind of trouble that had destroyed him once before. James didn't come the next day. Emma told herself it didn't matter. Told herself she wasn't disappointed when 4:30 came and went without the bell chiming, without those grey eyes finding hers across the shop, without the electric charge that had become as essential as breathing. She was lying to herself. Again. By 6 o'clock she'd convinced herself he wasn't coming back. That moment between them, his hands on her waist, his thumb on her cheek, had scared him off. She'd read too much into it. He was probably just being polite, catching her before she fell. Rich men didn't actually fall for struggling bookshop owners who smelled like old paper and desperation. The bell chimed at 6:15. Emma's head snapped up so fast she nearly gave herself whiplash. James stood in the doorway and he looked disheveled. His tie was gone completely, his jacket slung over one arm, his hair slightly messed as though he'd been running his hands through it. There was something almost vulnerable in his expression. "You're closed," he said. It wasn't a question. "I was about to lock up." Her voice came out breathier than she intended. "Did you need something?" "Yes." He stepped inside, and Emma's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. "I need to apologize for yesterday, for leaving the way I did. For—" He paused, struggling. "For touching you without permission." Emma blinked. "You caught me before I fell. You don't need to apologize for that." "I didn't let go." The honesty in those 4 words hit her like a physical blow. "I should have. The moment you were steady, I should have stepped back, but I didn't want to." The confession hung between them. Emma's heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I didn't want you to," she admitted quietly. Something flared in James's eyes, relief, hunger, something that made Emma's knees weak. "I stayed away today," he continued, moving closer, "because I thought distance would help. Thought if I could just reset, get control back, I could continue coming here and keep things professional. And? It didn't work." He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the tension in his shoulders. "I spent all day at the office accomplishing nothing because all I could think about was you. Whether you were safe on that death trap of a ladder, whether you'd worn your hair down again, whether you'd noticed I wasn't there." Emma's chest tightened. "I noticed." "Good." The word was rough, possessive, and it sent shivers down her spine. "Because I can't do this halfway, Emma. I'm either all in or I walk away now before this becomes something that destroys us both. And I need you to tell me which you want." The vulnerability in his voice broke something open inside her. This powerful man, standing in her grandmother's bookshop, essentially laying his heart at her feet. "I want you to stay," she whispered. "All in." The relief that washed over his face was almost painful to witness. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, but stopped just before touching her. His hand rose, hovering near her face, asking permission. Emma leaned into his palm. His hand cupped her cheek, warm and calloused and gentle. His thumb stroked along her cheekbone as though memorizing her. "I'm going to help you," he said softly. "With the shop, the debts, the repairs, everything." Emma stiffened, starting to pull back. "I don't need charity. Not charity." His other hand came up to frame her face, keeping her close. "Partnership. Investment. However you want to frame it. But I'm not watching you drown when I have the resources to throw you a lifeline." "Why?" The question was barely audible. "You don't owe me anything." "No." His eyes searched hers. "But you make me feel things I thought were dead. You make me want to be better than the cold bastard I've become, and maybe that's selfish, but I need this place to survive because you're part of it, and I need you to keep existing in my world." Tears pricked Emma's eyes. "James, let me help Emma, please." She should say no, should maintain her pride, her independence. But standing there with his hands cradling her face like she was something precious, Emma realized pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Okay," she breathed, "but I'll pay you back. Every penny." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "We'll negotiate terms later. Right now I need you to show me what needs fixing." For the next 2 hours, they walked through the book nook together. Emma pointed out every leak, every crack, every failing piece of equipment. James took notes on his phone with the focused intensity of a general planning a campaign. "The roof needs complete repointing," he observed, studying the water stains on the ceiling. "The electrical system is a fire hazard. This floor," he tested a particularly creaky board, "needs to be reinforced before someone goes through it." "I know." Emma's voice was small. "I know it's bad. I couldn't afford to fix it, any of it." James looked at her and something softened in his expression. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender, so intimate, that Emma's breath caught. "You won't have to do this alone anymore," he said quietly. They ended up in her tiny office, really just a converted storage closet with a desk and filing cabinets that probably predated the Second World War. Emma pulled out her ledgers, her face burning with shame as she showed him the numbers. James studied them in silence. His expression didn't change, but she saw his jaw tighten when he reached the page showing her outstanding debts. "Why didn't you ask for help sooner?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Family? Friends? A bank loan?" Emma laughed bitterly. "My family thinks this place is a lost cause. My sister—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "Claire makes it very clear at every opportunity that I'm the family failure, comparing me to her successful husband, her perfect house, her sensible career choices." James's eyes sharpened. "She said that to you?" "Among other things." Emma shrugged, trying for casual and failing. "And banks. They took one look at the state of this place and laughed me out of their offices. Politely, of course. But still." James set down the ledger and turned to face her fully. His hand came up to cup her chin, tilting her face until she met his eyes. "You are not a failure," he said, each word deliberate and fierce. "You took something you loved and fought like hell to keep it alive against impossible odds. That's not failure. That's courage." Emma felt tears threaten again. "You don't have to— I mean every word." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Emma's entire world narrowed to that single point of contact. "And anyone who makes you feel less than extraordinary is blind." They stood there, frozen in that tiny office, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing down on them. Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the warmth of his body just inches away, could see the war raging in his grey eyes between what he wanted and what he thought he should do. "I should go," he finally said, but he didn't move. "Yes," Emma agreed, but she didn't step back. His hand slid from her face down her neck, coming to rest over her heart. She knew he could feel it racing beneath his palm. "Tomorrow," he said roughly. "I'll bring contractors. We'll start the repairs." "Tomorrow," she echoed. He left then, but not before pressing his lips to her forehead, a kiss that was somehow more intimate than if he'd claimed her mouth. Emma stood alone in her office, her hand pressed to where his lips had been, and knew with absolute certainty that she was already his. The only question was whether he'd let himself be hers. The contractors arrived at 8 the next morning, a full crew with equipment, materials, and the kind of efficiency that only came with unlimited budgets. Emma watched in amazement as they swarmed the book nook like highly organized bees, assessing, measuring, planning. James arrived at 9, dressed down in dark jeans and a simple grey sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. Emma's mouth went dry at the sight of him. "Coffee?" she offered, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Always." His eyes held hers for a beat too long, a private smile playing at his lips. "How did you sleep?" "I didn't." The honesty escaped before she could filter it. "I kept thinking about all this, about you helping me, about what it means." "And what does it mean, Emma?" He moved closer, and she was intensely aware of the contractors working around them, pretending not to notice. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I want to find out. Something fierce and pleased flashed across his face. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers where they rested on the counter. The touch was brief, but electric. "Mr. Mitchell," one of the contractors approached with blueprints. "We need to discuss the support beams." James squeezed her hand once before turning away, and Emma felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. She watched him work throughout the morning, his sleeves pushed up, his focus absolute, commanding respect from every tradesman present. This was James in his element, decisive, intelligent, completely in control. But every so often, his eyes would find hers across the room, and that control would slip. Just for a moment. Just enough for her to see the want beneath it. At noon, Emma's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Sunday dinner, 6 p.m. "No excuses this time, Emma," Claire insists. Emma's stomach dropped. Sunday dinners at Claire's house were exercises in humiliation. Her sister's beautiful home, her sister's successful husband, her sister's subtle and not-so-subtle digs about Emma's choices. "Everything all right?" James appeared at her elbow, reading her expression with unnerving accuracy. "Family dinner Sunday," she tried to smile. The bi-monthly ritual of being reminded, "I'm the disappointment." His jaw tightened. "Do you want company?" Emma blinked. "What?" "Let me come with you." His voice was firm, decided. "You shouldn't face them alone." "James, you don't have to." "I want to." He turned to face her fully, his hand coming to rest on her lower back, a possessive, protective gesture that made her pulse race. "Let me be there for you." The words held layers of meaning. Emma searched his face, seeing determination and something deeper, something that looked dangerously like devotion. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." Viertirotate, the Sunday evening, found Emma standing in front of her mirror, changing clothes for the third time. Nothing felt right. The green dress was too casual, the black one too formal. The burgundy sweater too. Her doorbell rang. James stood on her doorstep in charcoal slacks and a navy sweater, holding flowers. Actual flowers. The sight of this powerful man, with a bouquet of autumn blooms, nearly undid her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Emma glanced down at the simple cream dress she'd finally settled on. "I look nervous." "That too." He offered his arm. "But we'll face them together." The drive to Claire's house in the suburbs was both too long and too short. James kept one hand on her knee, a steady, grounding presence. Emma found herself covering his hand with hers, lacing their fingers together. He squeezed gently. "Whatever happens in there," he said as they pulled up to the imposing Tudor-style house, "remember, you are extraordinary, and anyone who doesn't see that is a fool." Emma's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Thank you." Claire opened the door with her camera-ready smile, blonde highlights, designer dress, and diamond earrings that probably cost more than Emma's car. Her eyes widened when she saw James. "Emma, you brought a date." The surprise in her voice bordered on insulting. "How?" "Unexpected. Claire, this is James Mitchell. James, my sister Claire, and her husband Marcus." Emma watched as recognition dawned on Claire's face. Marcus, coming up behind his wife, went pale. "Mitchell?" Marcus extended his hand, suddenly respectful. "The Mitchell Agro Industries?" "The same." James's voice was cool, professional, but his hand remained firmly on Emma's back. "Well," Claire's smile turned calculating. "This is certainly a surprise. Emma, you didn't mention you were seeing anyone, especially someone so prominent." The way she said it made Emma feel like a child caught playing dress-up. But before she could respond, James spoke. "Emma doesn't brag." His voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. "It's one of the many things I admire about her." They moved into the dining room where Emma's parents waited. Her mother's eyebrows rose at the sight of James. Her father stood, offering his hand with genuine warmth. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. Claire dominated the conversation, dropping names and discussing Marcus's latest investment deals with the kind of casual superiority that made Emma's teeth ache. Every few minutes, she'd make a comment designed to highlight the differences between their lives. "Emma, are you still struggling with that little bookshop? Such a shame you couldn't make it work," said with false sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "Actually," James interjected smoothly, "the book nook is undergoing extensive renovations. Emma's created something quite special there. A genuine community space in a world of soulless chains." Claire's smile tightened. "How sweet that you support her little hobby." It's not a hobby. James's voice dropped, becoming dangerously quiet. It's a business, one that requires more courage and dedication than most people possess. Marcus tried to change the subject, asking James about his company. But Claire wasn't finished. "You know, Emma," she said, refilling her wineglass, "it must be nice to finally have a man around. I was starting to worry you'd given up on that front too." Although her eyes flickered to James with unmistakable interest, I can see the appeal. The implication hung in the air, ugly and obvious. Emma felt ice crystallize in her veins, but James moved faster than thought. He set down his fork with deliberate precision, his grey eyes fixing on Claire with an intensity that made her actually shrink back. "Let me be very clear," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Emma is worth 100 of any person at this table. Her loyalty, her kindness, her refusal to compromise her values for comfort, those are qualities most people spend their lives trying to cultivate and fail. If anyone here has given up on something, it's not her." The silence was deafening. Claire's face flushed red. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." James stood, helping Emma to her feet with gentle hands. "We're leaving. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, thank you for your hospitality. Claire, Marcus," his eyes were cold, "I won't be accepting any dinner invitations from you in the future." He guided Emma toward the door, his arm around her waist, steady and protecting. "James, wait." Emma's mother stood, her eyes full of something that might have been regret. "Please don't leave like this. Your daughter deserves better than to be belittled in her own family's home," James said quietly. "When you're ready to treat her with the respect she's earned, you know where to find us." They were in the car before Emma could process what had happened. James pulled onto a quiet side street and turned off the engine. Then he turned to her, cupping her face in both hands. "Are you all right?" Emma let out a shaky laugh. "You just defended me. To my whole family. You—" Her voice broke. "No one's ever done that before. Then they're all fools." His thumbs stroked her cheeks, catching the tears that had started to fall. "Emma, you're—" He stopped, struggling for words. "You're everything good I thought I'd never find again, and I will not stand by and watch anyone diminish you. Not your sister, not anyone." Emma looked at this man, this powerful, complicated, wounded man who'd somehow become her fiercest defender, and felt something shift irrevocably inside her chest. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "Thank you," she whispered. James's hands tightened on her face. She felt him tremble slightly, felt the war raging inside him. His breath came faster, shallower. His eyes dropped to her mouth. "Emma," he said hoarsely, "if I kiss you right now, I won't be able to stop." "Who asked you to stop?" For a moment she thought he would. Thought he'd close that final distance and claim her mouth and end this unbearable tension between them. But he pulled back instead, pressing his lips to her forehead in that gesture that was becoming achingly familiar. "Not yet," he murmured against her skin. "Not when you're emotional. Not after that disaster. When I kiss you, Emma Davis, I want you to have no doubts about me, about us, about anything." Emma's heart clenched. "And when will that be?" "Soon." It was a promise, a vow. Very soon. He drove her home, walked her to her door, and waited until she was safely inside before leaving. Emma watched his car disappear into the night and touched her lips, imagining what they would feel like against his. "Soon," he'd said. She could wait. She'd waited her whole life to feel this way. What was a little longer? The book nook was transforming before Emma's eyes. 3 weeks had passed since the disastrous family dinner, and the shop was barely recognizable. New electrical wiring, reinforced floors, a roof that didn't leak. It was like watching her grandmother's dream being resurrected from the dead. And through it all, James was there, not just funding it, but physically present. He showed up every morning with coffee for the workers, rolled up his sleeves and worked alongside them. Emma had watched him install bookshelves with his own hands, this billionaire industrialist with sawdust in his hair and a measuring tape clipped to his belt. It was impossibly attractive. They fell into a rhythm, a dance of almost touches and loaded glances. His hand on her lower back as he guided her past construction debris, her fingers brushing his when she handed him tools. The way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, like she was water and he was dying of thirst. But he hadn't kissed her, hadn't even tried since that night in the car. Emma was starting to wonder if she'd imagined the heat between them. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday when she found James still at the shop, alone, staring at freshly installed shelves with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're still here," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, and something in his face made her heart clench. He looked exhausted. More than that, he looked haunted. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Thought I'd make sure the shelving was properly secured." Emma moved closer. "James, it's midnight. You've been here since 7 this morning. You need rest." "I'm fine." "You're not." She reached out, touching his arm gently. "Talk to me, please." For a long moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he sank onto one of the newly refinished wooden benches, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. "I was married once," he said quietly. Emma's breath caught. She'd suspected, but hearing him say it felt different. "What happened?" "Catherine." His voice was flat, emotionless in the way of someone who'd buried their pain so deep it couldn't surface without destroying them. "We were young. I thought we'd build a life together, a family." He paused, and Emma sat beside him, close but not touching, giving him space to continue. "She got pregnant, we were ecstatic, but the birth—" His jaw clenched. "There were complications. Severe hemorrhaging. They had to perform an emergency hysterectomy to save her life." "Oh, James." Emma's hand found his. "She blamed me." His voice cracked slightly, said it was my fault, that I'd taken away her chance at motherhood, at the family she'd dreamed of. She couldn't stand to look at me. Filed for divorce 6 months later. Emma squeezed his hand, tears burning her eyes. "That wasn't your fault. Complications happen, you didn't—" "I know." But his voice said he didn't really believe it. "Rationally, I know. But the way she looked at me, Emma, like I'd destroyed her, like I was responsible for every dream that died that day. Is that why you—" Emma hesitated. "Why you're so careful with me? Why you won't let yourself—" "After she left, I had a vasectomy." The confession was brutal in its honesty. "I decided if I couldn't give her children, I'd make sure I could never give anyone children. That way I'd never hurt anyone like that again. Never watch someone I love look at me with that kind of hatred." Emma's heart shattered. "So you locked yourself away? Safer that way." He finally looked at her, and the raw pain in his grey eyes nearly undid her. "Until you. Until a blackout, and a woman who was honest in the darkness. And suddenly, safe wasn't enough anymore." "James." "But I'm terrified, Emma." His free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheek with infinite tenderness. "Terrified that I'll hurt you. That you'll look at me one day the way Catherine did. That wanting you the way I do will somehow destroy us both." Emma turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss there. "You're not going to hurt me. You can't know that." "Yes, I can." She shifted, facing him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "Because you're here. Because you defend me to my family. Because you renovated my grandmother's shop with your own hands. Because you're terrified of hurting me, which means you won't." "Emma, Catherine was wrong," Emma said fiercely. "What happened to her wasn't your fault. And the fact that she blamed you says everything about her, and nothing about you. You are not responsible for medical complications. You are not your ex-wife's pain. You are the man who brings coffee to construction workers, and memorizes book recommendations and watches me when you think I'm not looking." A sound escaped him. Half laugh, half sob. "You notice that?" "I notice everything about you." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The way you roll up your sleeves exactly twice. The way you take your coffee. The way you smile when you think no one's watching. I see you, James. All of you. And I'm not going anywhere." He pulled her against him then, his arms wrapping around her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Emma held him back, feeling the tremors running through his powerful frame, feeling his heart hammering against her cheek. "I don't deserve you," he murmured into her hair. "You don't get to decide what I deserve," she countered. "That's my choice, and I choose you, scars, fears, and all." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the half-finished shop, surrounded by sawdust and new beginnings. Emma felt his lips press against her temple, lingering there. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For seeing past the walls." His arms tightened around her. "For not running." "I'm not running." Emma pulled back just enough to look at him. "I'm all in, remember. You don't get to take that back now." Something shifted in his expression, the fear receding, replaced by something that looked dangerously like hope. His hand came up to cradle her face, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Emma Davis," he said slowly, "you are absolutely extraordinary. So you keep telling me. I plan to keep telling you." His thumb traced her lower lip, and Emma's entire body ignited at the touch. "Every day, for as long as you'll let me." The promise in those words was everything. Emma leaned into him, resting her forehead against his, breathing him in. "That might be a very long time," she warned. "Good." His lips brushed her forehead. "I'm counting on it." They sat together in the quiet shop, two wounded people finding healing in each other's arms, and for the first time in 7 years, James Mitchell allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance at happiness. And Emma, who'd spent so long fighting alone, finally understood what it meant to have a true partner. Someone who saw her struggles and didn't offer empty platitudes, but rolled up his sleeves and rebuilt her world alongside her. Someone who was worth the wait, even if that wait was killing her. The renovations were nearly complete. The book nook gleamed with fresh paint and polished wood, the new espresso machine hummed efficiently, and the roof no longer threatened to cave in during storms. Emma should have been ecstatic. Instead, she was terrified. The letter had arrived that morning, official, cold, devastating. Despite James's renovations, the property owner, who'd been patient for months, was selling the building, and the new buyer wanted the space for luxury apartments. Emma had 60 days to vacate. She'd sat in her tiny office, staring at those words until they blurred, and realized something crushing. All of James's help, all the renovations, all the hope she'd allowed herself to feel, none of it mattered if she didn't own the building. The book nook was still dying. She'd just been too distracted by grey eyes and gentle touches to see it. Emma didn't tell him, couldn't bear to see the disappointment in his face when he realized his efforts had been wasted. Instead, she carried the letter like a stone in her pocket, feeling its weight with every breath. James noticed anyway. Of course he did. "You're quiet today," he observed 3 days later, watching her rearrange the same stack of books for the 5th time. The shop was closed, the sun setting through the newly repaired windows, painting everything gold. "Just tired," she lied. "Emma." He crossed the shop in 3 strides, taking the books from her hands and setting them aside. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." His hands came to rest on her shoulders, warm and solid. "Talk to me." Emma felt something crack inside her chest. All the pressure, all the fear, all the desperate hope that had been building for weeks, it came pouring out. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice breaking. "None of this matters. The renovations, the new equipment, everything you've done. It's all for nothing." James's grip tightened. "Explain." She pulled the crumpled letter from her pocket, handing it to him with shaking hands. Watched his face as he read, saw the muscle in his jaw tick, saw his eyes go flat and dangerous. "When did you get this?" His voice was too controlled. 3 days ago." 3 days? He looked at her, and there was hurt beneath the anger. "And you didn't tell me? What was the point?" Emma's voice rose, defensive. "You've already done so much. Spent so much. I couldn't ask you to—" "Ask me?" His voice was sharp now. "Emma, we're partners. You don't get to hide things like this from me. You don't get to make these decisions alone anymore. We're not partners." The words escaped before she could stop them. "You're my what? My contractor, my investor, my—" "Yours." The word was fierce, possessive. "I'm yours, Emma, in whatever capacity you'll have me. But you need to let me in, all the way in, not just the parts that are easy." Tears burned her eyes. "I can't lose this place, James. It's all I have left of her. If I lose the book nook, you won't." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I'll buy the building. I'll outbid whoever wants it. No." Emma pulled back even though it hurt. "I won't let you buy me a building. That's not— I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because what happens when you get tired of me?" The fear came out raw, honest. "When you realize I'm not worth all this trouble? I'll have nothing and you'll have wasted—" "Tired of you?" James looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Emma, I can't breathe properly when I'm not near you. I rearrange my entire schedule just to be here at 4:30 every day. I lie awake at night thinking about the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, the way you laugh with your whole body, the way you look at me like I'm—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Like you're what?" Emma whispered. Like I'm worth something. His voice cracked. Like I'm more than my bank account or my company or the cold bastard everyone thinks I am. You look at me like I'm human, real, and I haven't felt real in 7 years until you. Emma's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. James, I'm in love with you. The confession was rough, desperate. I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you, and I have been since that first night in the pub when you were honest in the darkness. So no, Emma, I will not get tired of you. I will buy this entire city block if that's what it takes to keep you in my life. The world tilted. Emma stared at him, this powerful man who was looking at her like she was everything, and felt her own careful walls crumble. I love you too, she breathed. James went very still. Say that again. I love you. I think I've loved you since you caught me on that ladder and didn't let go. Since you defended me to my family. Since you showed me what it means to have someone fight beside you instead of leaving you to fight alone. Something broke in his expression. All the careful control, all the protective distance. He pulled her against him, his arms banding around her like he'd never let go. I need to kiss you, he said hoarsely. Emma, I need... Then kiss me. Her hands fisted in his shirt. Please, James, stop holding back. If I start, I won't stop. It was a warning, a promise. Good. For one suspended heartbeat, they stared at each other. Then James's control shattered. His mouth claimed hers with 7 years of loneliness, weeks of wanting, and the desperate need of a man who'd thought he'd never feel this way again. Emma gasped against his lips, and he swallowed the sound, deepening the kiss with a hunger that made her knees buckle. His hands were everywhere, threading through her hair, cupping her face, spanning her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. Emma clung to him, rising on her toes, pouring every ounce of her love into the kiss. It was nothing like she'd imagined. It was better, devastating, perfect. James walked her backward until her back hit the wall, never breaking the kiss. His mouth moved from her lips to her jaw, down the column of her throat, each touch reverent and hungry at once. Emma, he breathed against her skin. God, Emma. She threaded her fingers through his hair, pulling him back to her mouth. The kiss turned desperate, needy. 7 years for him, a lifetime for her, all of it pouring out in this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. His hands were shaking where they held her face. Come home with me, he said roughly. Please, I need you with me tonight. Emma's heart raced. She knew what he was asking, knew what it meant, and she wanted it. God, how she wanted it. Yes, she whispered. Take me home. The drive to his estate on the outskirts of Chester passed in a blur. James kept one hand on her thigh, his grip possessive, grounding. Emma watched the ancient city give way to countryside, watched the gates of his property open, watched his massive stone house appear in the headlights. She should have been intimidated. Instead, she felt like she was finally arriving somewhere she was meant to be. James helped her from the car with gentle hands, then swept her into his arms, literally, lifting her against his chest like she weighed nothing. I can walk, she protested, laughing. I know. His eyes were dark, intense, but I've been wanting to do this for weeks. He carried her through his house, all stone and wood and masculine elegance, up a sweeping staircase, down a hallway, lined with windows overlooking the moonlit grounds. His bedroom was exactly what she'd expected. Massive bed, dark furniture, everything precise and controlled, except for the moment he set her on her feet and looked at her like she was the only thing in his world that mattered. Emma. His hands framed her face. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her again, softer this time but no less devastating. His fingers found the zipper of her dress, pausing at the top. Tell me to stop, he whispered against her lips. Tell me if this is too fast. Don't stop. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt. Please don't stop. Outside, the moon climbed higher over Chester's ancient walls, and inside James Mitchell's bedroom, two people who'd been alone too long finally found their way home to each other. Emma woke to unfamiliar softness beneath her cheek. Silk sheets. A bed far too large and luxurious to be her own. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then she felt the warmth beside her, the solid presence of the man whose arms were wrapped around her like she was something precious he was afraid to lose. James. Memory flooded back. The kiss against the wall, the desperate drive to his estate, The way he'd looked at her in the moonlight streaming through his windows. The way he'd touched her. Heat bloomed in her cheeks. Last night had been... There were no words. She'd expected intensity from James. He was intense about everything. But she hadn't expected the tenderness, the reverence, the way he'd worshipped every inch of her skin like she was sacred. "Stop thinking so loudly," James murmured against her hair, his voice rough with sleep. "I can hear your brain working from here." Emma turned in his arms, finding herself face to face with him. His hair was mussed, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his grey eyes still heavy-lidded. He looked younger like this, less guarded, beautiful. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. "How do you feel?" "Perfect." And she meant it. Despite the uncertainty of everything else, despite the letter threatening her shop, despite not knowing what came next, in this moment, wrapped in James Mitchell's arms, Emma felt absolutely perfect. "You!" Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to identify. "Perfect," he echoed, but it sounded wrong somehow. Before she could question it, he kissed her, slow and deep and thorough. Emma melted into it, her hands sliding up his bare chest, feeling the rapid hammering of his heart beneath her palms. "Stay," he murmured against her lips. "Don't go anywhere today. Just stay here with me. I should probably check on the shop. Please." The vulnerability in that single word stopped her protest. Just today, let the world exist without us for a few hours. How could she refuse that? Okay, just today. They spent the morning in his enormous bed, talking and touching and learning each other. James told her about building his company from nearly nothing after his father's death. Emma told him about her grandmother's stories, about growing up in the bookshop before it was hers to save. He made her breakfast, actual breakfast, bringing a tray up to the bedroom with fresh fruit and pastries and coffee, so perfect it rivaled her own. "You can cook?" Emma teased, biting into a strawberry. "I can order from the best bakery in Chester and arrange things on plates," he corrected, smiling. "It's not the same thing." That smile. God, when he smiled like that, unguarded, genuine, Emma felt like she could conquer anything. They made love again in the afternoon light. Slower this time, sweeter. James mapped every curve of her body with his hands and mouth, murmuring words against her skin that made her feel cherished, wanted, loved. Emma had never felt so safe, so completely seen and accepted. She fell asleep in his arms as evening approached, exhausted and happy, and more content than she'd been in years. Emma woke in darkness. The bed beside her was empty, cold. She sat up, confused, reaching for James and finding only vacant space. "James?" No answer. She found her dress, pulled it on with fumbling fingers, and padded barefoot through his massive house. The hallways felt different in the dark, imposing, unfamiliar. She was about to call for him again when she saw light spilling from beneath a door at the end of the hall. His study. Emma pushed the door open and froze. James stood at the window, fully dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, staring out at the moonlit grounds. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. Everything about his posture screamed tension. "James?" Her voice was small. "What's wrong?" He didn't turn around. "You should go back to sleep." The coldness in his tone felt like a slap. "What happened? Did I—" Nothing happened. But his voice was too controlled, too flat. "I just needed some space." Space. After what they'd shared, after the intimacy, the vulnerability, the words of love, Emma's stomach dropped. "You're shutting me out." "I'm thinking." "About what?" She moved closer, saw his reflection in the window glass, and her breath caught. His face was a mask of barely controlled panic. "James, talk to me. I made a mistake." The words were quiet, brutal. Emma felt the world tilt. "What?" "This. Us." "I moved too fast, got carried away. I shouldn't have—" He stopped, jaw clenching so hard she could see the muscle jump. "Shouldn't have what?" Emma's voice shook. "Shouldn't have told me you loved me. Shouldn't have brought me here. Shouldn't have made love to me. All of it." He finally turned, and the emptiness in his eyes destroyed her. "I can't do this, Emma. I thought I could, but I can't." "Why?" Tears burned her throat. "What changed between this afternoon and now? I woke up and realized what I'd done. What I'd promised you without thinking it through. His voice was getting harder, more distant with every word. You want things I can't give you. Marriage, children, a future, and I won't go through that again. I never asked you for those things. You will. He cut her off. Eventually you'll want them, and I'll have to watch you realize I'm not enough. Watch you look at me the way Catherine did. I can't survive that twice, Emma. Emma's hands fisted at her sides, nails biting into her palms. So you're ending this before it even begins, because of something that hasn't happened, because of fear, because I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The words came out harsh, angry. Good. Anger was better than the devastation threatening to swallow her whole. You're so terrified of being hurt again that you'd rather destroy us now than risk being happy. Better now than later, when it would hurt more. It already hurts, Emma's voice broke. You told me you loved me, you made me believe... She pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold herself together. God, I'm such an idiot. I actually thought... Emma... No. She dropped her hands, meeting his eyes with all the dignity she could muster. You don't get to do this. You don't get to make me fall in love with you and then throw me away because you're scared. You don't get to decide what I want or what I can handle. That's my choice. Mine. I'm doing this for both of us. You're doing this for you. Emma moved toward the door, her legs shaking so badly she wasn't sure they'd hold her. Because you're terrified, and I get it, James. I understand fear. But love requires courage, and apparently you're not brave enough for that. She saw him flinch, saw pain flash across his face, but he didn't stop her, didn't call her back. Emma made it to the front door before the tears came. Her phone was dead, her car was at the shop, and she was standing in the middle of nowhere in a cocktail dress at 2 a.m. She called for a taxi, wrapped her arms around herself, and waited in the cold English night, while her heart shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. Behind her in his study, James Mitchell stood frozen, listening to the sound of the taxi arriving, listening to Emma leave, doing nothing to stop her. He'd done the right thing, the smart thing, the safe thing. So why did it feel like he'd just made the worst mistake of his life? He sank into his desk chair, head in his hands, and for the first time since Catherine left, James Mitchell allowed himself to cry. But Emma was already gone, driving away into the darkness, and his tears couldn't bring her back. 3 weeks. 21 days since Emma had walked out of James Mitchell's house with her heart in pieces. 21 days of forcing herself out of bed, opening the shop, smiling at customers, pretending she was fine. She wasn't fine. James hadn't come back, hadn't called, hadn't sent a single message. The renovations were complete, paid in full, and that was that. He'd cut her out of his life as cleanly as a surgeon's knife, and Emma was left to bleed alone. The book nook was beautiful now. Customers commented on it daily. Business was picking up. Everything should have been perfect. Except Emma couldn't look at the custom bookshelves without seeing James's hands installing them. Couldn't make coffee without remembering his 4:30 visits. Couldn't exist in this space without feeling his absence like a physical wound. She'd thrown herself into work, into fighting the eviction notice, into anything that would stop her from thinking about grey eyes and gentle touches and promises made in moonlight. It wasn't working. "You look terrible," her friend Sophie observed, stopping by with lunch Emma wouldn't eat. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep. Badly, in fits and starts, waking up reaching for someone who wasn't there." "And when's the last time you ate something that wasn't directly from a coffee cup?" Emma couldn't remember. "I've been busy." "You've been heartbroken." Sophie's voice softened. "Emma, honey, you need to take care of yourself." "This isn't..." Emma barely made it to the bathroom before she was sick. Sophie found her 10 minutes later, sitting on the floor, pale and shaking. "How long has this been happening?" Sophie asked quietly. "A few days. It's just stress. The eviction, everything with..." She couldn't say his name. "Or it's something else." Sophie's eyes were knowing. "Emma, when was your last period?" Emma's mind went blank. When had it been? Before James? Before that night? Before... Oh, God. Her hand went to her stomach. No, that's not... We used protection. We were careful. Protection fails." Sophie helped her to her feet. "Come on. We're getting a test." The 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. Emma stared at them, her entire world narrowing to those 2 devastating marks. Pregnant. She was pregnant, with James Mitchell's child. The man who'd had a vasectomy specifically to avoid this. The man who'd pushed her away because he was terrified of exactly this kind of future. "Oh my God," she breathed. Sophie squeezed her hand. "What do you want to do?" Emma pressed her hand to her still flat stomach. A baby, growing inside her, part of her and part of James, created in a night of love that he'd called a mistake. "I need to tell him," she whispered. "Are you sure that's a good idea, after the way he has a right to know, even if he'd broken her heart, even if he wanted nothing to do with her. This baby, their baby, deserved a father who at least knew of its existence." The next morning, Emma made an appointment at a clinic. She needed to be sure, needed to know exactly what she was dealing with before facing James. The ultrasound technician was young, cheerful, chattering away as she moved the wand across Emma's abdomen. Then she stopped, frowned, moved the wand again. "Is something wrong?" Emma's heart hammered. "Wrong? No." "But," the technician smiled, "congratulations, you're having twins." The world spun. Twins, two babies, two hearts beating on that grainy screen, two tiny forms already taking shape. Emma left the clinic with ultrasound pictures clutched in her shaking hands and a heart full of terror and wonder in equal measure. The Mitchell Agro Industries occupied a modern glass building on the outskirts of Chester's business district. Emma had never been here, had never seen James in his element. Now, standing in the gleaming lobby, she felt completely out of place in her simple dress and cardigan. The receptionist's smile was professional, but dismissive. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to see Mr. Mitchell. It's urgent, personal." "Mr. Mitchell doesn't see anyone without an appointment. If you'd like to schedule, tell him Emma Davis is here." Her voice was firmer than she felt. "He'll see me." The receptionist looked doubtful, but made the call. Emma watched her expression change from skeptical to surprised to carefully neutral. 10th floor. He'll meet you in his office." The elevator ride lasted an eternity. Emma caught her reflection in the mirrored walls, pale, dark circles under her eyes, looking every bit as wrecked as she felt. She pressed her hand to her stomach, drawing courage from the two tiny lives growing there. "You can do this. He needs to know." The elevator doors opened onto an executive floor that screamed money and power. Glass walls, modern art, assistants moving with quiet efficiency. And at the end of the hall, through glass walls of his own, Emma saw him. James sat behind an enormous desk, staring at his computer screen. But as she approached, he looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. Emma watched him go pale. He stood as she entered, and for a moment they just stared at each other. He looked terrible, thinner, exhausted, like he hadn't slept since she'd left. Good. She hoped he'd suffered even a fraction of what she had. "Emma." Her name was hoarse in his mouth. "What are you doing here? We need to talk." She closed the door behind her. Grateful the glass walls had blinds, he quickly closed. "Privately. If this is about the shop, about the eviction, I can help. I should have already." "It's not about the shop." Emma pulled the ultrasound pictures from her purse with shaking hands. "It's about this." She held them out, watched his confusion as he took them, watched his eyes scan the grainy images, watched the exact moment comprehension hit. He went absolutely still. "What is this?" "I'm pregnant." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "With twins. They're yours." For a long moment, James said nothing. Then he set the pictures down on his desk with deliberate care, his expression going blank. Empty. "That's not possible," he said quietly. "I know it seems unlikely, but no." His voice was hard now, cold. "It's not possible. I had a vasectomy 7 years ago. I'm infertile. Those babies aren't mine." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "I don't know what game you're playing, Emma, but it won't work." He moved away from her, putting his desk between them like a barrier. "I understand you're in a difficult situation. But lying about paternity, that's low, even for what?" Emma's voice rose, anger flooding through her veins. "Even for someone like me? Some desperate woman trying to trap a rich man?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She was shaking now, fury and hurt and disbelief warring inside her. "I came here to tell you the truth. These are your children, James. I don't care what some procedure 7 years ago was supposed to do. I'm telling you it's impossible." His voice was like ice. "Vasectomies don't just fail. The chances are less than 1 in 1,000, and given that we were together once..." Don't. Emma's voice cracked. Don't reduce what we shared to once like it meant nothing. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, but it was gone before she could be sure. If you're pregnant, I'm sorry, he said, each word measured and distant. But I'm not the father. Find whoever actually is and have this conversation with him. Emma stared at this man, this stranger wearing James Mitchell's face, and felt something inside her die. You actually believe that? You actually think I would lie about this? What else am I supposed to think? That maybe, just maybe, your vasectomy failed? That medical procedures aren't infallible? That I'm standing here telling you the truth because you deserve to know? Tears streamed down her face now, and she didn't care. But you'd rather believe I'm a liar, that I'm trying to trap you, because that's easier than facing the possibility that you were wrong. Emma! No! She snatched the ultrasound pictures back, clutching them to her chest. I came here to do the right thing, to give you a chance to be part of this. But you made your choice. You pushed me away when I loved you, and now you're calling me a liar when I'm telling you the truth. She moved toward the door, her legs shaking so badly she could barely walk. James didn't try to stop her, didn't call her back. Just stood there behind his desk, grey eyes empty, while she fell apart in front of him. For what it's worth, she said at the door, her voice barely above a whisper, I did love you, more than I thought possible. And these babies, your babies, will never know what they missed. She walked out without looking back. Through the executive floor with its glass walls, past secretaries who quickly looked away from her tear-stained face, into the elevator that felt like a cage. By the time Emma reached the lobby, she couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. James had called her a liar, had looked at proof of their children and dismissed it, had chosen his fear over her truth. Sophie was waiting in the car outside, one look at Emma's face telling her everything she needed to know. Oh, honey, she murmured, pulling Emma into her arms as soon as she got in. Emma sobbed against her friend's shoulder, feeling something fundamental break inside her. She thought James was different, thought his love had been real, thought she'd finally found someone who would stay. She'd been wrong about everything. Take me home, she whispered. Please just take me home. As they drove away, Emma made a decision. She'd close the shop, take what little money she had and move somewhere far from Chester, far from James Mitchell and his empty eyes and devastating words. She'd raise these babies alone. She'd be enough for them, even if she hadn't been enough for their father. And she'd never ever let anyone destroy her like this again. Behind her, in his office, James stood frozen, staring at his empty hands where those ultrasound pictures had been. Hearing Emma's broken voice saying your babies over and over again, he'd done the right thing, the logical thing. Vasectomies didn't just fail. So why did watching her leave feel like ripping his own heart from his chest? Why couldn't he breathe? And why did those tiny shapes on that ultrasound screen haunt him like ghosts of a future he'd just destroyed? James couldn't focus. 3 days since Emma had walked into his office with those ultrasound pictures. 3 days since he'd called her a liar and watched her leave with tears streaming down her face. 3 days of telling himself he'd done the right thing. 3 days of feeling like he was suffocating. He'd tried to work, tried to bury himself in contracts and meetings and the familiar rhythm of business. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw those grainy images. 2 tiny forms, hearts beating on a screen. Your babies, Emma had said. Your babies. You look like hell. James looked up to find David Chen, his lawyer and closest friend, standing in his office doorway. David had known him since university, had stood by him through the divorce, had been his voice of reason for 2 decades. I'm fine, James lied. You're not. David closed the door and sat down uninvited. You've been staring at that same document for 40 minutes without reading a word. Want to tell me what's going on? Nothing. James. David's voice was patient. I've known you too long for that. What happened? For a moment, James considered lying, considered waving it off as stress, as business concerns, as anything but the truth. But the weight of it was crushing him, and he needed someone to tell him he'd done the right thing. Emma came to see me. The words felt like glass in his throat. She's pregnant. Claims the babies are mine. David went very still. Babies? Plural. Twins. James pulled out his phone, brought up the photo he'd taken of the ultrasound pictures before Emma had snatched them back. He'd told himself it was for legal documentation. He was lying to himself. She showed me these. David studied the image, then looked at James with an expression that was hard to read. "And what did you say?" "That it's impossible. That I had a vasectomy 7 years ago. That she needs to find the actual father and stop trying to—" James stopped, the words tasting wrong even as he said them. "Stop trying to what?" "Trap me." But saying it out loud made him feel sick. David was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Did you even consider the possibility that she's telling the truth?" "David, I had a vasectomy. The chances of failure are not zero." David leaned forward. "James, vasectomies can fail. It's rare, but it happens. Natural recanalization. Did you ever have follow-up tests to confirm you were still infertile?" James went cold. "What?" "After a vasectomy, you're supposed to have periodic checks, especially in the first few years. Did you?" The answer stuck in his throat. He'd had the initial follow-up, the one that confirmed the procedure's success. But after that? After Catherine left and he'd buried himself in work and isolation? "No," he admitted. "So for 7 years you've assumed you were infertile without any medical confirmation." David's voice was careful. "James, I'm not trying to make you feel worse, but you just accused a woman you claim to have loved, of lying about paternity based on an assumption." "It wasn't an assumption, it was, when's the last time you actually verified you couldn't have children?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. James felt his world tilt, felt the careful logic he'd built his rejection on start to crumble. "I need you to be honest with me," David continued quietly. "Do you think Emma Davis is the kind of woman who would lie about something like this?" James closed his eyes, seeing Emma's face. The devastation, the tears, the way she'd clutched those ultrasound pictures to her chest like they were precious. The way her voice had broken when she'd said, "These babies, your babies, will never know what they missed." "No," he whispered. "God, no. She's the most honest person I've ever met." "Then maybe," David said gently, "you should get tested before you destroy both your lives over a medical assumption." The test results took 3 days. 3 days of James existing in a state of suspended animation, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except Emma's broken voice and those 2 tiny forms on the ultrasound screen. 3 days of reviewing every moment they'd spent together, every word she'd said, every tear she'd shed, trying to find evidence of deception and finding only honesty. She'd never asked him for anything, never expected his help with the shop until he'd insisted, never demanded his love or his future. She'd simply offered her own heart and asked for nothing in return, and he'd repaid her by calling her a liar. The doctor's call came on a grey Wednesday afternoon. "Mr. Mitchell, I have your results." The doctor's voice was professionally neutral. "Your sperm count is within normal range. You are, in fact, fertile. It appears your vasectomy underwent spontaneous recanalization. The vas deferens reconnected naturally. It's rare, but it does happen." James couldn't breathe. The phone felt like lead in his hand. "You're certain?" "Completely. Based on these numbers, you've likely been fertile for several years. If there's a question of paternity, there's no question." James's voice broke. "Thank you, doctor." He ended the call and sat in the silence of his office, the results clutched in his shaking hands. Fertile. He'd been fertile. The vasectomy had failed, probably years ago, and he'd never known, never checked, never questioned. And Emma had been telling the truth. Those babies were his children, growing inside the woman he loved, the woman he'd destroyed with his fear and his accusations and his cowardice. James made it to his private bathroom before he was sick, his body rejecting the horror of what he'd done. When there was nothing left, he slid down the wall, head in his hands, and finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of his mistake. He'd called Emma a liar, had looked at proof of their children and dismissed her, had watched her walk away heartbroken and done nothing to stop her, all because he was too terrified to believe something good could happen to him, all because he'd chosen fear over faith. James pulled out his phone with shaking hands, pulled up Emma's number, and called. It rang once, twice. Then, "The number you have reached is no longer in service." He tried again. Same result. Panic seized his chest. He called the book nook. It rang endlessly, no one answering. David appeared in the doorway, took one look at James's face and paled. "What happened?" "The vasectomy failed. The babies are mine. Emma was telling the truth and I... His voice broke. I need to find her. I need to apologize. I need to... Go. David was already pulling up information on his phone. I'll handle everything here. Go get her. James was out the door before David finished speaking. Sorasi Diavashiaki was the book nook was dark, closed. A sign in the window read simply, closed indefinitely. Thank you for your support. James's heart stopped. He tried the door, locked. He peered through the windows. The interior was empty, personal items gone as though Emma had simply vanished. He drove to her apartment. The landlord, after much persuasion and a substantial bribe, confirmed she'd moved out 2 days ago. No forwarding address. Did she say where she was going? James heard the desperation in his own voice. Said something about getting away, starting fresh. The landlord shrugged. Seemed upset. Whatever you did, mate, you better fix it. James spent the next week searching. He called every contact he had, used every resource at his disposal. But Emma had disappeared completely, deliberately, leaving no trace. She didn't want to be found, especially not by him. He went to her parents' house, swallowing his pride. Her mother answered, and her expression turned cold when she saw him. You have some nerve showing up here. Please, I need to find Emma. I made a terrible mistake. I need to... You broke her heart. Her mother's voice was hard. She called me crying, told me what you said to her. My daughter came to you with the truth and you called her a liar. I know, I was wrong. The vasectomy failed. The babies are mine. I have proof. Too late. She started to close the door. She's gone. She doesn't want to be found. Especially not by you. Please. James put his hand on the door, not forcing it, just pleading. Please, just tell me if she's safe, if she's okay. I need to know she's okay. Something in his voice must have reached her, because her expression softened slightly. She's safe, that's all I'm telling you. Now go away and leave my daughter alone. You've done enough damage. The door closed in his face. James stood on that doorstep, staring at the closed door, and felt the last of his hope crack. Emma was gone, carrying his children, alone and heartbroken because of him, and he had no idea how to find her. 2 months passed. 2 months of James using every resource at his disposal, hiring private investigators, checking hospitals, following every lead that went nowhere. Emma had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. He kept working, kept going through the motions, but he was hollow inside. Everyone noticed. His employees walked on eggshells. His friends worried. David practically staged an intervention, forcing him to eat, to sleep, to maintain some semblance of functionality. You can't find someone who doesn't want to be found, David said gently. Maybe you need to accept... No. James's voice was raw. I won't accept it. She's out there somewhere, pregnant with my children, thinking I don't want them. Thinking I don't love her. I can't accept that. Then what are you going to do? Whatever it takes. James looked at his friend with red-rimmed eyes. For however long it takes, I'll search until I find her. And when I do, I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. And if she won't forgive you, then I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. It was David who found the lead, a regional craft and farmers' fair in a village 40 miles from Chester. One of the vendors mentioned seeing a pregnant woman who looked like Emma's description. James was in his car before David finished talking, driving faster than was safe or legal, his heart hammering against his ribs. Please, please let it be her. Please let me have one more chance. The fair was held in the town square. Booths selling handmade goods, local produce, crafts. Families wandered through, children laughing, the smell of food and autumn leaves in the air. And there, sitting on a bench near a fountain, alone and exhausted, was Emma. James's legs nearly gave out at the sight of her. Her belly was enormous, clearly visible even from a distance. She wore a simple dress, her hair longer than he remembered, her face pale and drawn. She sat with one hand pressed to her lower back, the other on her stomach, looking utterly exhausted and utterly alone. James moved toward her as if in a dream, each step feeling like it took a lifetime. People glanced at him. This man in an expensive suit walking through a country fair like he was approaching an altar. Emma looked up. Their eyes met across 20 feet of distance. He watched the color drain from her face, watched her hand go to her stomach in a protective gesture, watched her try to stand, to flee. But her body was too heavy, too pregnant. She couldn't move fast enough. James fell to his knees in front of her. In the middle of the town square, in front of dozens of witnesses with no pride left to protect him. "Emma," he said, and his voice broke on her name. "Please, please let me explain." Emma couldn't breathe. James Mitchell was kneeling in front of her, in public, in the middle of a village fair with dozens of people watching. His grey eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard, his expensive suit rumpled as though he'd slept in it. He looked destroyed. Good. He deserved to be destroyed. He'd destroyed her first. "Get away from me." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I have nothing to say to you." "Emma, please, just listen. Listen." She tried again to stand, and this time managed it despite her unwieldy body. "I listened last time, when you called me a liar, when you looked at pictures of your own children and told me to find their real father. Why would I listen now?" People were staring now, whispers spreading through the crowd. Emma didn't care. Let them stare. Let them see what James Mitchell really was. "You were right." The words came out hoarse, desperate. "The vasectomy failed. I'm fertile. The babies are mine. I have medical proof, test results, everything." Emma's hand tightened on her stomach. "Now you believe me. 2 months later, after I came to you with the truth and you threw it back in my face." "I was wrong. Emma, I was so wrong. Wrong." Her voice rose, shaking with fury and pain. "You were cruel. You accused me of lying, of trying to trap you, of—" Her breath caught. "Do you have any idea what you did to me? I was already terrified, already overwhelmed, and I came to you because I thought you deserved to know, because despite everything, I still loved you enough to want you in their lives." Tears streamed down her face now, and she didn't bother wiping them away. James's face was a mask of agony, but she couldn't care about his pain, not when hers was still so raw. "I know." His hands were shaking where they rested on his thighs. "I know what I did. I know I destroyed us. I was terrified, Emma, terrified of being hurt again, terrified of believing something good could happen to me. So I chose fear over faith, and I've regretted it every second since you walked out of my office. Regret doesn't fix anything." "I know." He stayed on his knees, even as his legs must be aching, even as people crowded closer to watch. "But I'm asking, begging, for a chance to try, to make this right, to be there for you and for our children." "Our children?" Emma's laugh was bitter. "Now they're our children. 2 months ago they weren't yours at all. What changed, James? Besides the test results?" "Everything changed. I spent 2 months searching for you. 2 months going insane trying to find you, trying to make sure you were safe. 2 months realizing that I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life, and that pushing you away was the worst mistake I'll ever make." A woman in the crowd sniffled. Someone murmured, "Romantic." Emma wanted to scream at them that this wasn't romance. This was devastation dressed up in public apology. "Love isn't enough," she said quietly. "Not when you run at the first sign of difficulty. Not when your immediate reaction is to accuse me instead of trust me. Love requires faith, James, and you have none." "You're right." He didn't flinch from the accusation. "I was a coward. I am a coward. But Emma, I want to change. I want to be brave enough to deserve you. Please, please give me that chance." Emma looked down at this broken man, this powerful industrialist kneeling in the dirt of a village square, and felt her heart crack open all over again. Part of her wanted to forgive him, wanted to believe his pretty words and his desperate eyes. But the larger part, the part that had spent 2 months crying herself to sleep, that had moved to this tiny village to escape the memories, that had felt their babies kick while facing the terror of single motherhood, that part was too hurt to forgive. "No," she said, "I gave you a chance. I gave you my heart, my body, my trust, and you threw it away. You don't get another one." She saw something die in his eyes, but he didn't stand, didn't leave. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "If you won't let me help, I'll respect that. But I'm not leaving you to do this alone. I'm not abandoning my children, even if you've abandoned me. You don't have a right to—" "I have every right." His voice was firm now, not harsh but absolute. "Those are my children, my responsibility. And whether you like it or not, I'm going to be part of their lives. You don't have to forgive me. You don't have to love me. But you can't stop me from being their father." Emma stared at him, fury and fear warring inside her. "So what? You're going to stalk me? Follow me around? No, I'm going to support you. From whatever distance you're comfortable with. If you need groceries, I'll have them delivered. If you need anything for the babies, just tell me. If you need space, I'll give it, but I will not disappear, not this time. He finally stood, and Emma had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They were close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, could see the desperate love and regret churning in those grey depths. "I love you, Emma Davis," he said, loud enough that everyone in the square could hear. "I love you and I love our children, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you, whether you ever forgive me or not." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing there with her hand on her pregnant belly and her heart in pieces all over again. True to his word, James didn't disappear. Emma discovered he'd rented the cottage next to hers, literally next door, separated by maybe 15 feet and a small garden fence. She'd stormed over to confront him the day she found him directing movers with furniture. "You can't do this," she said, fury making her voice shake. "I can and I am." His voice was calm but unyielding. "I'm not breaking any laws. I'm not harassing you. I'm simply living nearby so I can be available if you need anything." "I don't need anything from you. Then you won't notice I'm here." But she did notice. God, how she noticed. Groceries appeared on her doorstep, not delivered by stores, but clearly selected by someone who knew she was pregnant and what she might need. Fresh fruit, vegetables, prenatal vitamins, foods rich in iron and calcium. When her cottage's heater broke during a cold snap, a repairman appeared before she could call anyone. Paid in full, he explained, by her neighbor. When she struggled to reach something on a high shelf in the village shop, James was suddenly there, retrieving it without a word before disappearing again. He never pushed, never demanded her time or attention, just existed nearby, available, steady, infuriatingly present. Emma hated it, hated how aware she was of him, hated how her treacherous heart leapt every time she caught a glimpse of him through her window, hated how safe she felt knowing he was close, even though she was supposed to hate him. 2 weeks after he'd moved in, Emma was carrying groceries from her car. Too many bags, too heavy, but she was stubborn and refused to make multiple trips. She was halfway to her door when one of the bags tore, spilling cans across the driveway. "Damn it," she muttered, trying to bend down with her enormous belly in the way. James was there before she could even fully squat, gathering the scattered items, replacing them in a new bag he'd apparently grabbed from his own cottage. "I can do it myself," she said automatically. "I know." He handed her the repaired bag, then picked up the others without asking permission. "But you don't have to." He carried them to her door, set them down gently, and turned to leave. "James." The word escaped before she could stop it. He turned, hope flaring in his eyes. "Yes? Why are you really doing this?" Her voice was tired, stripped of anger. "Why not just move on? Find someone easier?" He studied her for a long moment, and the naked honesty in his expression made her chest ache. "Because you're not something to move on from," he said quietly. "You're everything I ever wanted, and was too afraid to keep. And those babies in there?" He nodded toward her stomach. "They're a miracle I never thought I'd have. So no, Emma, I'm not moving on, I'm moving forward. With or without your forgiveness, I'm going to be the father they deserve, and the man you needed me to be." He left before she could respond. Emma stood on her doorstep, one hand on her aching belly, and felt her certainty start to crack. Actions, Gran used to say. Judge people by their actions, not their words. And James's actions, for 2 solid weeks now, had been nothing but supportive. Respectful, patient, present. But was it enough? Could actions erase the devastation of his words? Could time heal the wound he'd carved into her heart? Inside her, the babies kicked, both of them, as though reminding her they had a stake in this too. They deserved a father. And despite everything, James was trying to be one. Emma touched her stomach, feeling the movement of the 2 tiny lives she carried. Lives created in love, even if that love had shattered. "What do I do?" she whispered to them. "How do I forgive someone who hurt me this badly?" The babies kicked again, and Emma closed her eyes, knowing the answer wasn't simple, but knowing, too, that somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and anger, she still loved James Mitchell. And that love, that stubborn, resilient, infuriating love, was the most terrifying thing of all. It happened at 2 in the morning. Emma woke to pain, sharp, insistent, wrong. Her hand flew to her stomach, finding it hard as stone, a contraction, but it was too early. She was only 34 weeks. The babies weren't supposed to come yet. No, she whispered into the darkness. Please, not yet. Not now. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, stealing her breath. Emma reached for her phone, but her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it. It clattered to the floor, the screen cracking, going dark. Panic seized her throat. She was alone, in a village where she barely knew anyone, miles from the nearest hospital, and her babies, her precious babies, were coming too early. Emma tried to stand, but another contraction doubled her over. She cried out, the sound echoing in her empty cottage. Pain and fear warred inside her, making it impossible to think, to plan, to... The front door crashed open. James filled the doorway, hair wild, wearing only pajama bottoms and a shirt he'd clearly thrown on in seconds. His eyes found her on the floor and his face went white. Emma! He was across the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her. What's happening? Are you... Labor? She gasped as another contraction hit. Too early. James, they're coming too early. Something's wrong. Look at me. His hands framed her face, steady despite the fear she could see in his eyes. Look at me, Emma. You're going to be fine. The babies are going to be fine. But we need to get you to hospital. Right now. He didn't wait for permission. He scooped her into his arms, all of her, pregnant belly and all, and carried her toward the door like she weighed nothing. My bag? Emma tried to think through the pain. I need my hospital bag, my phone. I'll handle it. He settled her carefully into the passenger seat of his car, a Range Rover she hadn't seen before, clearly chosen for safety. Just breathe. Focus on breathing. He was back in seconds with her bag, a blanket, his own phone. Then they were moving, the engine roaring to life, gravel spraying as he accelerated down the narrow village lane. Emma gripped the door handle, another contraction making her cry out. James's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. Squeeze as hard as you need, he said, his voice tight but controlled. I've got you. I'm scared. The admission came out broken, vulnerable. James, I'm so scared. I know, but you're the strongest person I know. He squeezed her hand, his eyes never leaving the road even as he drove faster than was safe. You've survived everything life's thrown at you. You'll survive this, and I'll be right there with you. The drive to the private hospital in Chester took 25 minutes that felt like hours. James called ahead, somehow managing to drive and arrange everything with one hand while holding Emma's with the other. By the time they arrived, a team was waiting. I'm the father, James announced to the nurses, his voice brooking no argument. I'm staying with her. Do whatever you need to do, but I'm not leaving. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to remind him he'd given up that right when he'd called her a liar. But another contraction hit, and suddenly his hand in hers was the only solid thing in a world of pain and fear. They wheeled her into a delivery room. Nurses hooked up monitors, checked her dilation, conferred in urgent whispers that made Emma's heart race faster. The babies are in distress, one doctor explained, her face serious. We need to deliver soon. You're at 34 weeks, which means they'll need NICU care, but the survival rate at this stage is very high. Do whatever you need to do, James interrupted, his jaw tight. Save them. Save all of them. His hand never left Emma's. Through the preparations, through the pain that seemed to tear her apart, through the moments when she was certain she couldn't do this, James was there. I can't, she sobbed at one point, exhausted and terrified. I can't do this. Yes, you can. He pressed his forehead to hers, his grey eyes fierce. You're Emma Davis. You rebuilt your grandmother's shop from nothing. You faced down your family alone. You survived me breaking your heart. You can do anything, and you're not alone anymore. I'm here, I'm right here. Hours blurred together. Pain and pressure and James's voice in her ear steady and encouraging, his hand in hers, holding on like she was his anchor in a storm. One more push, the doctor urged. Come on, Emma, one more. Emma gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed. The first cry split the air, high, indignant, beautiful. It's a girl, the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, wriggling form covered in vernix and fury. Emma sobbed. James made a sound that was half laugh, half cry, his hand tightening on hers. Again, the doctor said. The second baby's coming. Ready? Two more pushes, and another cry joined the first. This one slightly deeper, just as angry at being evicted early. And a boy, the doctor said, smiling. Twins, a girl and a boy. They placed the babies on Emma's chest for just a moment, both so small, so impossibly small, their eyes squeezed shut, their tiny fists waving. Emma's hands came up to cradle them, tears streaming down her face. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, my loves, my beautiful, perfect loves." She looked up at James and found him frozen, staring at the babies with an expression of absolute wonder. Tears tracked down his face unchecked, and he made no move to wipe them away. "They're—" His voice broke. "Emma, they're ours," she finished softly. "They're ours." The nurses had to take them then, too premature, needing immediate care. Emma watched them go, her arms suddenly empty, her heart following those tiny forms wrapped in blankets. James bent down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You were incredible," he murmured. "So strong, so brave. Emma, you're—" "Go with them," she interrupted. "Please, don't let them be alone." He looked torn, glancing between her and the door where the nurses had disappeared with their children. "Go," Emma insisted. "I'm fine. They need their father." Something broke in his expression at those words. Their father. Something broke in his expression at those words. He kissed her forehead again, then her cheek, then, hesitantly, her lips, soft and brief and tasting of salt tears. "I'll come back," he promised, "as soon as I know they're settled." Then he was gone, following their babies, leaving Emma in the sudden quiet of the delivery room, with her heart in pieces, and her body exhausted, and her soul somehow, impossibly, starting to heal. Saisia Marzi's Emma woke in a private room hours later, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked Chester's ancient walls. Her body ached. Her stomach felt wrong, empty, and for a moment she couldn't remember why. Then it all came rushing back. The babies, the birth, James. She struggled to sit up, looking around wildly for easy. James appeared at her bedside, looking utterly exhausted and impossibly happy. "Don't move too fast. You need rest. The babies are perfect." His smile was tremulous. "Small, but perfect. Breathing on their own. The doctors say they're doing remarkably well for 34 weeks. They'll need to stay in NICU for a few weeks, but Emma, they're perfect." Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt lightheaded. "Can I see them?" "Soon. They want you to recover a bit more first. But I took pictures." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, brought up a photo. Two tiny babies side by side in an incubator, so small they looked like dolls, wearing little knit caps, one pink, one blue, their eyes closed, their hands curled into fists. Emma's vision blurred with tears. "They're beautiful. They have your nose," James said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "And I think the boy has your eyes. They're... Emma, they're everything." She looked up at him. Really looked. He was still wearing the rumpled clothes from last night, his hair standing on end, his eyes red-rimmed. But there was something different about him, something open, raw, real. "You stayed," she said quietly. "Of course I stayed." He took her hand carefully. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere. Not from you, not from them. Never again." Emma wanted to pull away, wanted to maintain the walls she'd built so carefully. But lying in this hospital bed, her body aching from delivering their children, those walls felt insubstantial, pointless. "I'm still angry with you," she admitted. "I know. I don't know if I can forgive you." "I know that too." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "But I'm asking for the chance to try. Not for me. For them. They deserve parents who can at least be civil to each other. Who can work together. Who can—" "I don't want civil." The words escaped before she could stop them. "If we're going to do this, I don't want civil co-parenting and scheduled visits and polite conversations. Our children deserve better than that." James went very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" Emma took a shaky breath. "I'm saying that you were right. Love requires courage and faith. And I've been as much a coward as you, hiding behind my hurt instead of fighting for what could be. Emma, I love you." The confession felt like jumping off a cliff. "I never stopped loving you even when I hated you. And our children," her voice broke, "they deserve a father. Not a stranger who visits on weekends. A real father who's there every day. I want that. James's voice was hoarse. God, Emma, I want that more than anything. But I need you to be sure. I can't. If you change your mind later, if you decide you can't forgive me, then we'll deal with it together. She squeezed his hand. But right now, in this moment, I'm choosing to have faith in you, in us, in the possibility that people can change and love can heal, and maybe, just maybe, we deserve a second chance. James's face crumpled. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing kisses to her knuckles, her palm, her wrist. I love you, he said against her skin. I love you so much, and I swear, Emma, I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of this chance. Then start now. She tugged him closer. Stay. Help me figure out how to be a mother to 2 premature babies. Help me be strong enough for all of us. He kissed her then, soft and careful, tasting of tears and coffee and hope. Always, he promised against her lips, for the rest of our lives. Outside the window, Chester's walls stood sentinel, as they had for 2,000 years, witnessing another love story, another beginning, another chance at happiness born from pain. And in the NICU 3 floors down, 2 tiny miracles slept peacefully, unaware that their parents had just decided to fight for a future together. A family. Imperfect, complicated, beautiful. Theirs. 5 months after the twins' birth, Emma stood in the doorway of James's bedroom, their bedroom now, and watched him with their children. Oliver was draped over his father's shoulder, drooling contentedly, while James patted his back, trying to coax up a burp. Lily lay in her bassinet nearby, awake and watching her father with serious dark eyes that were indeed Emma's. Come on, little man, James murmured, his voice soft. I know it's in there. Help your old dad out. Oliver obliged with a burp that was impressive for someone so small. James laughed, a sound that still made Emma's heart skip, and nuzzled his son's downy head. That's my boy. Emma had moved into James's estate 2 months ago, after weeks of him driving back and forth to her cottage multiple times a day. It had been his idea to renovate one wing into a proper nursery and family space, giving her privacy when she needed it while keeping them together as a family. He'd kept every promise, more than kept them. James had learned to change diapers, prepare bottles, handle 2 screaming infants at 3 in the morning with patience Emma hadn't known he possessed. He'd rearranged his entire work schedule, leaving the office at 4 every day, their old meeting time, to be home for evening routines. He'd bought books on infant development and read them cover to cover, had learned to swaddle, to soothe, to recognize the difference between hungry cries and tired cries, and through it all he'd been patient with Emma, giving her space when she needed it, support when she asked, and love, constant, steady, unwavering love, every single day. You're staring, James said without turning around, a smile in his voice. I'm admiring. Emma moved into the room, running her hand down his back. You're getting good at this. I have an excellent teacher. He turned, Oliver still on his shoulder, and kissed her softly. How was your meeting with the contractors? Emma's smile widened. James had insisted on reopening the book nook, in Chester this time, in a building he'd purchased outright, but he'd made it clear the shop was hers. He was just providing the space and the capital, the vision, the heart, the soul of it. That was all Emma. They start next week. The space is perfect, James. Perfect. Good. He shifted Oliver to his other shoulder. Because your grandmother's legacy deserves to live on, and because... His voice softened. I want our children to grow up running between bookshelves the way you did. I want them to understand the magic of what you built. Emma's eyes burned with happy tears. I love you. I love you too. He said it easily now, without fear, without hesitation, every day, more every day. And the dinner party had been Claire's idea, a family gathering to properly meet the twins and put the past behind us. Emma had been reluctant, but James had insisted they go together. You don't face your family alone anymore, he'd said firmly. Never again. Now sitting in Claire's pristine dining room with Oliver in her arms and Lily in James's, Emma watched her sister's smile grow increasingly strained as James commanded the entire room's attention. The twins are lovely, Claire said, her tone suggesting they were anything but. Though having 2 at once must be exhausting. Worth every sleepless night, James said before Emma could respond. They're extraordinary, just like their mother. Marcus tried to redirect the conversation to business. asking James about a merger. But James barely engaged, too focused on adjusting Lily's blanket, making faces that made her wave her tiny fists. "You know," Claire said over dessert, her wine glass perhaps a bit too full, "it's admirable, James, how you've stepped up. Not every man would, given the circumstances." The table went quiet. Emma felt ice crystallize in her veins. "What circumstances would those be, Claire?" James's voice was dangerously soft. "Well, you know, the surprise of it all. The timing." Claire's smile was sharp. "Some men might have questioned things." James set down his fork with deliberate precision. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "Let me be very clear about something. These are my children. I never questioned that for a moment that mattered. A lie, but one that protected Emma. And Emma," he turned to look at her, and the love in his eyes made her chest ache, "is the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. She carried our children, gave birth 5 weeks early, and has been an incredible mother. If you're implying anything less than that, we're done here." Claire's face flushed red. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." James stood, helping Emma to her feet with gentle hands. "You've spent years making your sister feel inferior, making her feel like she wasn't enough. But Emma is worth 100 of everyone at this table combined. Her loyalty, her courage, her refusal to compromise her values, those are qualities most people spend their lives trying to cultivate and fail." He'd said something similar once before at another disastrous dinner, but this time Emma stood beside him, equal, united. "If you want to be part of our lives, part of our children's lives, you'll treat Emma with the respect she's earned," James continued. "Otherwise, this is the last family dinner we'll attend." Emma's mother stood. "James, please. Claire didn't mean—" "Yes, she did," Emma said quietly, finding her voice. "She always does, but that's okay, because I don't need her approval anymore. I have a family, a real family, and we're leaving." They walked out together, twins in their arms, leaving shocked silence behind them. In the car, Emma started laughing. James joined her, the sound echoing in the enclosed space. "Did we just do that?" Emma asked. "We absolutely did." He reached over, lacing his fingers with hers. "Feel good?" "Incredible." And it did. For the first time, Emma felt free of her family's judgment, free to simply be herself. Suistuwam Samat of 3 weeks later, James drove her to Chester's ancient walls at sunset. The twins were with a nanny he'd carefully vetted the first time Emma had left them, and only because James had insisted she needed a break. "Where are we going?" Emma asked as he helped her out of the car. "You'll see." He led her up to the wall walk, where tourists usually crowded, but now stood empty. The setting sun painted everything gold, the River Dee shimmering in the distance. James stopped at a particular spot, turned to face her, and Emma's breath caught. In his arms were Lily and Oliver. He'd arranged for the nanny to bring them, already dressed in matching outfits that were ridiculously adorable. "You planned this," Emma accused, tears already forming. "Absolutely." He took a deep breath. "Emma Davis, 5 months ago, you gave me the most precious gifts I've ever received. Not just these 2 miracles." He looked down at the babies with infinite tenderness, but a second chance, a chance to prove that love is stronger than fear, that courage is choosing to stay even when it's terrifying. He somehow managed to drop to one knee while holding both twins, who gurgled happily. "I spent years building walls around my heart. You tore them down in one night in a blackout, with honesty and hope and a smile that made me believe in magic again. I pushed you away because I was terrified, but you came back, not because I deserved it, but because you're braver than anyone I've ever known." Emma was crying openly now, her hands pressed to her mouth. "These 2, James looked at Oliver and Lily, "are proof that miracles happen, that even when we think something is impossible, love finds a way. And I want to spend the rest of my life creating more miracles with you. Building a life, a family, a future that honors everything we've survived and everything we've become." He produced a ring box, somehow still holding 2 babies, and flipped it open with his thumb. The diamond caught the sunset, throwing rainbows across the ancient stone. "Emma Davis, will you marry me? Not because of these beautiful children, but because I love you more than I thought I could love anything. Because you make me want to be better. Because coming home to you feels like coming home to myself." Emma was nodding before he finished. "Yes, yes, God, yes." James stood, carefully, because babies, and kissed her as the sun set over Chester, painting their future in gold and hope and promise. Oliver chose that moment to grab a fistful of Emma's hair. Lily spit up slightly on James's expensive shirt. They broke apart laughing, this small, chaotic family, perfectly imperfect. "I love you," Emma whispered against his lips. "I love you too, all of you, forever." 2 years later, the Book Nook, renamed Davis and Mitchell Books, was the crown jewel of Chester's historic district. The opening had been 6 months ago, and the place was perpetually packed. Emma had created something magical, a space that honored her grandmother's vision while being entirely new. James stood behind the cafe counter, an image that still made business associates do double takes, making coffee with practiced efficiency while Emma helped a customer find books. Oliver and Lily, now 2 years old, played in the children's section James had designed specifically for them. Oliver was already trying to read to his sister, holding a picture book upside down. Lily listened with serious attention. "Dada!" Lily spotted him and came running on wobbly toddler legs. James caught her, swinging her up into his arms. "Hello, princess, having fun?" "Book," she waved the one she'd been reading. "Ollie read book. Is he now? That's very smart of him." Emma appeared, Oliver on her hip, and James's heart did what it always did when he saw her, expanded to fill his entire chest. She wore a simple dress, her hair down, a smudge of dust on her cheek from organizing shelves. She was perfect. "You're staring again," she teased, echoing words from years ago. "Still admiring," he countered, pulling her close with his free arm. The twins squirmed between them, giggling. A customer approached, clearly wanting service but pausing at the sight. The powerful James Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Agro Industries, holding a toddler while covered in sticky fingerprints, kissing his wife while their son tried to eat his father's watch. "Perfect family," the elderly woman observed with a warm smile. James looked at Emma, at Oliver, at Lily, at this bookshop that held his wife's dreams, and their history and their future. Yes, he agreed, perfect, because it was. Not flawless. They still had moments of doubt, still carried scars from their past, but they'd chosen each other, every day. Through fear and joy and midnight feedings and moments of pure magic, they'd built something beautiful from broken pieces, a family, a love story, a life, and it was perfect precisely because it was theirs. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications.